Hey guys, I'm standing out in my garden here today. I'm going to introduce a principle that really helped this project that I'm working on to go. And that principle is using flexible structures and inflatable structures. Only this time I'm going to do that using dirt rather than air. Let me introduce the problem. This is the garden here. I'm really interested in garden innovation, and there's lots of little projects. They may be kind of hard for you to see while you're looking at this, but this is my winter lawn here in, my winter garden here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I try to garden in such a way that I've lowered the cost as much as I can, and also reduce the work as much as I can. So this was an effort I put in probably about 10 years ago. It's been wonderful for us. We really loved it. You can see we used pavers. We have some really high raised garden beds here. And we just really discovered the beauty of having a very high raised bed garden. It is so much easier to work on, and it's actually fun to come out here, and this has become a living space for us. The problem though is that it is insanely expensive, and I really wanted to find a way that was a lot less expensive. Here's a garden box right here that costs about $54. You can see that it's made out of stucco cement. It's a very tall box and very easy to use. I have mulch in it so that I don't need to weed it at all. It's automatically watered, and also I don't ever till these. So this is one box here. I'm going to come over to another box here. This is the first box, and the one that I'm going to talk a little bit about today that I built. And then here's my third box right over here. This box is a 4-foot diameter box. This box over here is a 5-foot diameter box. This box cost me about $80 to build. This box here cost me about $54 to build. Here is one that probably could be even less than that. It's just simply soil inside of hardware cloth. And again, here's the principle. The principle is that we're going to put that hardware cloth under tension, and we're going to draw it into a nice form that we like. And you can see there's probably a variety of ways to do this that would not be expensive at all. For instance, we could line this. Right now it's not lined with anything. It's just got soil in it. But we could line this with rocks. We could line it with charcoal. We could fill the bottom of this with charcoal or burnt stumps or something like that that won't decompose. There's so many things that you can do that are really inexpensive. So the point I want to make here is that this is a way to build a garden box that doesn't cost very much money at all. This one here would probably be a $17 box. And so it looks a lot like the fabric bags. The beauty of these though is that I'm trying to build something that can really last a long time in the sun. The thing that I want to mention is that I don't do any composting at all. I do what's called compost in place. So you just take whatever you have. Here I have wood chips and I have grass, and I just put that on top of the soil and I let it compost into the soil. And that way, as it's composting, you get that nice compost tea underneath, and then I never till at all. I just continue that, and that builds up the soil structure. I've never had a problem with that. Completely organic gardening, never need to put any fertilizers on, but just put a lot of compost on there. And one of the beauties of these boxes are that you can put a lot of compost on here. And you can see right now what I'm doing with these little caps is I'm planting through the compost. It's quite easy to do. You just plant through it, and then I put these little caps on here to keep, in my case I have crickets, keep the crickets from eating these vegetables. To tell people that if you're weeding, if you're hand watering, if you're composting or tilling the ground before you plant, you're probably working too hard. We'll get down to explaining how to build this. This is the hole that I dug for the pipe that's going underground, and you can see it comes over to my water supply here. I dug it deep enough that I can actually bury it a little bit underneath, or bury the pipe a little bit underneath the ground. I'll be using this soil inside of the raised bed. Hooked up my sprinkler system here. See, I ran it down here. I made it about 15 inches down in this particular case. When I did the calculations for how deep I needed to dig this thing out, I realized that I was going to have to dig this about 13 inches deep. This whole area in here was going to have to go down about 13 inches, and then that soil would then go into the center of this, and you'll see that in a future video. But for the moment, I piled everything around the hole that I was digging here. You can see it's there. It's waiting now for the hardware cloth to be put around it. I'm going to fill this in, and so everything is close to the center of that pole right there. And I'm going to use that pole to tell me whether I have whether the hardware cloth is set in there circular and with the pole right in the center. This is the watering pole. That the PVC has been pressure tested. Right now it's under pressure here, and I'm going to now fill in the trench to 2 inches just to barely cover the PVC, and then also I'm going to fill it in completely around the pipe here and make sure that it's standing straight up. We're going to use this pipe to make sure that our raised bed is completely circular. The outside of the grow box is first made from 1/2 inch hardware cloth. Each one of those little squares that you see is a 1/2 inch, and you'll need, for each grow box, you'll need about 15 feet of it. You can see that I have cut the screen so that there are prongs that stick out on one side, and the other side I cut flush so that you bend these around. So what you do, you grab one of these and you push it. It's hard to do with the camera in the way here, but push it like this, rotate it around. Then you reach through the screen, you grab it, and you continue pulling it around. And then you rotate it like that. And that sticks them together. And you do that all up and down this whole screen. You only need to wrap one prong side around. I don't think it gains you that much to wrap two. It might gain you a little strength, but I don't think that strength is really required for what we're doing here. On my lawn here, and you can see that I have taped it off down about 5 inches from the top, because that's how far I want to cut down. Okay, now what I'm doing now is I'm coming over 4 squares, cutting down to the next level, and I can see now that I probably didn't need that tape on there. Bending it once, coming over 1, 2, 3 squares, bending down again. What this does is it gives me a 1 inch thick edge, and then it gives me a place here where I can put the stucco, and so I make a really solid edge here. This is what it looks like when it's finished. I'll come in a little bit closer. We don't want to tie in these pieces here. You can see these pieces here. We don't want to tie them into this quite yet. And the reason for that is because we're going to put some plastic between the two of these a little bit later. The plastic protects the stucco, and the stucco protects the plastic. Okay, at this point, what I've done is I have loosely piled it up inside. You can see that I've buried some of the trench here, and I'm getting ready now to put the plastic in. I bought a 50-foot roll of 3-foot wide 4.5 mil plastic at Home Depot, and that 3 feet is just about right. I tucked it up, you can see I tucked it up underneath this right here, and then I stuck in, just for extra security, I stuck in some screws just to kind of hold it up there while we pile in the soil. So I put that all the way around. I could take off that tape anytime. There's no need for the tape to be there. I've made a device here that allows me to level and also to determine how close I am to round. So this moves. You can see I can move it around. It's fairly crude. I made it out of boards and PVC. Nothing special about it. In the center here, it's held by a little O-ring that just slips over there, and then it doesn't move up and down. So you can get this thing fairly level. So what I've done is I've gone around and got it pretty close to level at this point. Not super perfect yet. My main goal is to get the bottom of this way down here at the bottom. I want to get it as round as I possibly can. And so what I've done here, you see I've taken a lot of the soil out of the middle here. I think it's preferable not to have any in the middle, actually, but I threw it in there thinking I was going to save myself some time, and it really didn't help that much. You want to make sure that your plastic is reasonably draped downward, and then the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the distance between this and this wall here is the same all the way around. So as I run around this first time, I noticed that some places it's about 3 inches. Here, for instance, it's about 3 inches away, 3 and even 4 inches away. And over on this side, it's, let me lift it up, show you, it's like 1 inch away. So I can see that I'm not round yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the side here that needs to come out, and I'm going to start putting a little soil on there to push it out. Since the maximum distance was about 3 inches and the minimum distance on the other side was about 1 inch, I'm going to be shooting for a 2-inch distance as I push this, as I move the soil in on the inside to true it up. At this point, I'm not worrying as much about it being level as I am about it being correctly circular at the bottom. All right, I went around and pushed down, put the soil kind of around the outside, and at the same time, I made sure that I was about 2 inches away from the bottom. Remember now, the bottom is what really counts at this point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's level. So I'm going to take this, and notice that there's some parts of it that don't seem that round at the top. That's okay. As we go along, we're going to true everything up and make sure it's nice and round. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go around and make sure that we are level. And you can see at this point that it is not level. So I've got to do some work there. I'll end up kind of lifting up some places and pushing down other places. You push down by digging underneath it with a shovel and then just wiggling it a little bit, and it'll slide down. Okay, this is the stage that it's at now. You can see that it's starting to form up a little bit nicer. The plastic's starting to lay out. Just filled in underneath the screen in an attempt to make sure that the screen doesn't slip down anymore. The next stage is to dig out some of the soil that's around the box and start to fill that in. I've also bought some sand and some compost to mix into it, which will add a little bit of volume. As I dig out the ground around the box, I don't want to get too close to the box. I don't want to undermine the screen. So what I'm going to do is to dig out about 5 inches away. I watered down the ground around it so that I can dig it up more easily. But I also realized in the process that I could probably fill in the soil inside the container and pack it down better if I would let some water run in there. So in particular, I let it run down the sides to kind of fill stuff in and compact it in a little bit more. I'm hoping that'll work. I can see that the amount of soil that I thought would be needed, the amount that I would have to dig out outside the box, is pretty close to correct, but probably I didn't have to dig as deep as I thought I would. This area is going to be filled in eventually with mulch, and so I have a little bit of something leading up to the box, and then I'll have mulch over everything. About some of it will be quite deep, but the minimum will be 2 inches deep to keep the looking nice and keeping the weeds out and stuff. I dug out around the raised bed here. You can see that I've left some soil at the base to kind of support, and then I put it all in here and then covered it with about 1 inch of sand. Actually, I bought 3 bags of sand. They're not terribly expensive. And what I found in general was, if you look at the walls, they're not perfectly straight, but I'll be able to true those up either by pushing on them a little bit or by actually the cement or the stucco will true it up pretty well as well. So yeah, it turned out that the walls trued up very straight just simply by filling them. And I guess that's really when you put all of that hardware cloth under tension, it just has a tendency to form a nice cylinder. As you're going along and putting it in, you can stand by the side, kind of like this, and look straight down, and then you put the soil in, you put the shovel in and you just keep jamming it in around the edge, and it brings stuff pretty much, it puts it in tension and brings it out where it needs to be. Also, I'll probably give it another round of watering to make sure it all goes in. I've done a couple things that I need to explain now. One of them is that I have made sure that the soil, even wet, comes to within about 1 inch of this screen here. The reason for that is that I want it to push out as much as I can, but at the same time I'm going to be stuccoing up that inside piece there, and I want the stucco to go right to the bottom of that, to the bottom of the screen, but really no further, because I don't want it to extend down into the soil. The other thing that I did was I pushed these sides in. I kept pushing them in, trying to make them more and more round. I used my jig to make sure that the walls were fairly straight up and down, and I found that the more I did that, the more circular it became in the end. Sometimes what I had to do was dig down into here and push it out with a shovel until these walls became straight. Another thing that I did was I went around and I tried to make sure these are ready to be stuccoed as well, that they're flat, level, that they don't poke up too much inside here. I don't know if you can see that, but I want them to be as so for instance here, you don't want those to be too far from the wall. Now the other thing that I did that I think is going to be a vast improvement is, you'll see down underneath here, I took some water and I sprayed out underneath the plastic. You recall that I put in more plastic than I needed down there at the bottom, and I think that was a good thing. I didn't realize until I started to squirt it off, but it leaves an area or a pit down in here, and I'm going to fill that with stucco. And that's going to become sort of a little foundation for everything. I want to make sure it comes out to here as well, because I'd like to dig away a little more of this soil and put the compost here up closer to the box. All right, let's see. Tried to make sure that everything was even, level, and round. Another thing that I did was I put in a little bit of mulch down here. I needed to do that just because I had wet the ground so much down around the base of it that I couldn't work to do the stuccoing. Have we got our face masks on? It's time to make stucco. Okay, we've got the stucco. It's sitting in the wheelbarrow here. This is one bag, and notice these little fibers in it. This is called one coat stucco. That's the kind of stucco that you want to have for this, and the reason for that is because we're going to put this potentially into more tension, and concrete does not do well in tension. It does well when it's compressed, but not in tension. First thing we're going to do is we're going to form a little pond here of water, and then we're going to start mixing in the water. It says for a bag it takes about 1 gallon to 2 gallons, and so it's not very much. We'll see how that goes. One of the things that you can do that makes a big difference is rather than painting stucco, you can actually mix the color in with it. This is an old bottle that I have from many years ago. Now they usually use powder that you mix into it, and it's probably about a bag of stucco per bottle of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and empty this whole bottle into here. Okay, here we go. We're going to start mixing a little water in. Like I said, we're going to mix probably about 1 gallon of water into this, but you start off pretty slow. All right, and then you start slowly mixing this in. Takes a little effort and time, but it's worth it to get the consistency right. After the mixing of the stucco, the drying of that stucco is so fast that I just completely lost track and didn't take any videos of how to do the stuccoing. So I want to show you how to do the stuccoing at this point. What I have down here is something to put the mortar on here. Notice that I cut it circular there. That was so I could set it right against the base. Now it takes a little while to figure out how to do this, but using a pair of gloves, you grab some stucco, stick it on here, and you squish it in, and then I hold it like this and bend it slightly and then push it up the wall. Get another bit, push it up the wall. Get another, push it up, and you continue on until you get it pretty good, and then you take swipes across it at a very low angle, keeping it as smooth as you can. Remember that we have that area right underneath here that we're going to use as kind of a foundation. So the very first thing we do is grab some stucco and really squish it underneath there to make sure that it's tight and that it's right against the ground, and that's going to provide our base. In order to do the top here, what I did was I came and put just a little glob of stucco on here, and you just squish it up against that screen and you just push it up. But you take it pretty much down to the ground. You can see that I'm using the curved side of this mortar board in here, and I just work my way around and then just smooth over this surface. Now there's some tools you can get that are a little bit better than that give you a little nicer edge on it, but I was fine with this. It worked out okay. If I were a professional after I was done, what I would have done was put a nice coat of sodium silicate on the outside, something that would hold the moisture into the concrete to allow it to set properly. But what I did for the next couple of days was I sprayed it down with water every few hours. That was pretty time intensive, but I didn't want to go out and buy myself some sodium silicate, so that's what I did. I really hope that some of you out there who are watching this will give this a try. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe below.